Thank you, Brother Sam and the All Britain boys, or brothers, or however you want to mention them. I do want to talk to you about something different. Like I said, I've not done this before, but I want to talk to you about a time frame. If you can't see, you might as well just go ahead and move up front, because I'm going to be writing all on this board. So if you want to come see the board, hey, you understand, you can move. It don't bother me. So, but it's very important as we walk into the Gospels that we understand what's going on. And we understand the time frame and what Jesus is walking into. Because a lot of times we don't have a clue of what Jesus is walking into. And what has happened is most of the time we know 586 BC what has taken place. The Babylonian captivity, okay? Syrian captivity of Israel took place in 722 BC, 586 BC. Babylonian Nebuchadnezzar comes in and wipes out Israel. Doesn't take them all back to captivity, but takes a lot of them. There was 3 times that they came before that. Remember, they came and took Daniel in the first time. Then they came back again, and then in 586, it was over. Okay? Now, 512 is when the temple is rebuilt. Okay? It's rebuilt and dedicated. Remember, they allowed them to go back and rebuild the temple. In 445 BC, you got Nehemiah. And what does he do? He builds the wall in how many days? Anybody know? 42. No. Close. He rebuilds the walls. Pretty big deal. 42 is real fast. 52 days. 52 days. He rebuilds the walls. Then comes, this is where we're going to look at first right here. You got Malachi right here in 400 BC. And so let's read a couple passages from Malachi, because this is the last book of the Old Testament. And we need to understand what's going on here. And it's not really going well. Okay, you got 516 BC right here. Temples back to having temple worship and everything. This is 116 years later. Now read what's going on. Let's read a couple. We'll read 11 through 13 and then 2, 1 through 3. It says, "For my name will be great among the nations, from the rising of the sun to its setting. Incense and pure offerings will be presented in my name in every place, because my name will be great among the nations, says Yahweh of hosts." He said, man, you're to worship me. But look at what he says now. "But you are profaning it when you say the Lord's table is defiled, and its product, its food, is contemptible. You also say, look, what a nuisance. And you scorn it, says the Lord of hosts. You bring stolen, lame, or sick animals, and you bring this," he says, "as an offering. Am I to accept that from your hands, asks the Lord? Therefore, the decree is for your priest. If you don't listen, and if you don't take it to heart to honor my name, says Yahweh of hosts, I will send a curse among you, and I will curse your blessings. In fact, I've already begun to curse them, because you're not taking it to heart. Look, I'm going to rebuke your descendants, and I will spread." See, Jesus, you just need to understand, the Lord does not put up with junk. He says he's going to spread animal waste over your faces. And the waste from your festival sacrifices will be taken away with it. See, Malachi is the last prophet of God in 400 BC. That's probably on the outline there. Malachi is the last prophet of God in 400 BC. What had happened is the people had become corrupt. Even the priests had become corrupt. And what was going on is they were bringing corrupt, crippled, lame, blind sacrifices. And God's saying, man, are you going to bring this as a sacrifice? You wouldn't even give that to the governor. And you're going to bring that up in the house of God? Now you could correlate that with a day in the house of God many times. People walk up into God's house and bring their disobedience and they bring their sin and they walk in here and want the blessings of God. And God says when you deal with your sin and when you deal with your disobedience and when you deal with trying to just... Okay, we're preaching now. When you decide to just want to be a spiritual consumer, spiritual narcissistic church, and you don't give a rip about anybody out in the world that's lost, He says, bless God, I'm going to spread animal waste over your building. If that's too strong for you, you can leave. That's what He said. And that's what He says. And so, what's amazing is, we've been through Ezra and Nehemiah a little bit. Man, here they get right. But not long. But take note, folks. It don't take long in America either. It's been longer than that since the last awakening in America. So, there is 400 years of silence on your outline. From Malachi right here, there's going to be 400 years of silence. There's not going to be anything significant go on or take place. Let me rephrase that. There will be a lot of things take place, and you may think they're insignificant, but God is going to work through those to get us to the Messiah. I didn't put this on the outline, but let me just read this to you. It says, Galatians 4:4, when the time has come to completion, or to be fulfilled, God sent His Son, born of a woman, both under the law, to redeem those who are under the law, so that they might receive adoption as sons. There's 400 years of silence. Now, God has not gone off His throne. He's not taken a 400-year sabbatical. But He said, because of your disobedience, we just read, you're fixing to be a curse. And so I want to tell you about some of the things that they went through. Now, this next date here is 334 BC. And this is kind of a key date because of the guy that comes onto the scene, which is Alexander the Great. Okay? He is a very key man. Now, he is not on the scene very long. He actually conquers the known world and defeats the Persians. Okay? The Persians had been in control. The Persians defeated the Babylonians. Okay? And he did this, do you know what age Alexander the Great did this at? 24. Now you need to understand Alexander the Great was also, he's a military guy, but he was a Greek philosopher. He learned from them. He learned from Aristotle, which he would have learned from Socrates and Plato. He actually took scientists out on the battlefield to bring back stuff so they could learn. Now, what was different about Alexander the Great and the Greeks is they were not like the Romans. Now, the Romans, what would they do? They would come in, not totally, but almost like ISIS. You either bow down to us or we'll just kill you. It's kind of simple as that. We'll just cut your head off. What was different about Alexander the Great is he wanted to culturally unify the ancient world. What he wanted to do was Greekify, or which would become known as Hellenization. He wanted to Hellenize the known world, which brought about syncretism, which is basically what he would do this. He was like, it's fine, you bring your Judaism, you bring your Christianity, you bring this, you bring whatever. Let's mix it all together. We'll integrate all the society together. We'll integrate all the philosophy together. We'll integrate everything together in one society. Well, you getting it? There you go. We'll just add a little Judaism, we'll add a little paganism, we'll add a little this, we'll add a little that, and everything will be really good. Yeah. Alexander's a very smart man. Very smart to be a military person. And he strove to entice people to the empire, not dominate you over the head. Okay, which was totally opposite. Totally opposite of the Romans that we'll see, have seen, and will see. Okay? Okay? And so, this is the thing you need to get out of Alexander. And literally what you see, and this is what you'll be blown away with, that's impacting our culture today, is literally he gave us a fourfold plan, which I called a paganism, which is very rampant in our culture. Let me give you those four. First one is this, is athletics. They created gymnasium, they created the Olympic Games, they tried to create a culture of athletics. They were saturated with it. That's the first thing. So that's not bad. You understand? I understand what you're saying. I grew up, my last name is Ball. I know more sports than you do, more than likely. If not, I know as much as you do just about. My dad coached for 30 years, so I pretty much know. But they knew if we can suck them in with athletics, this is one way we can get them into culture. A lot of families sacrificing their kids for athletics. A lot of parents, unfortunately, trying to live their childhood through their children. Since they couldn't win a trophy, they're trying to win it through their children. Sorry. I'll be blunt honest with you. So, athletics. So that's not really bad. Well, let's move on to the next one. Media. He created a way to get out propaganda. What's controlling our culture today? Media, yeah. Yeah. Now, at least we have freedom here. Now, other countries, they're going to give you, you're only going to get what comes down from the dictator or from the government, and this is what you need to know. But you need to understand, Alexander was not about that. He was enticing you to come in. He was wanting to bring everybody in to Hellenization, to where everybody be in the Greek culture. Third, education. We get you in here, now we got to educate you. We got to educate you into the Greek culture. We got to educate you into the philosophy. We got to educate you about the Greek gods. It's no different today. They're trying to educate your children and your grandchildren with liberalism, with Common Core, with whatever other junk they can pipe down your children so they can water them down to where hopefully they will control them down the road. Unless you pour into them the Word of God and the gospel and disciple them, they will not get it. Because the world will give them what they want. Alexander's very smart. Let's get them in their pleasure, their rec time. Let's pour it in their brain. Then we're going to educate their children so the next generation can be brought up in it. And then if we don't hook you with that, we'll get you with the last one. Theater. Did I give you that? Last one is theater, if I didn't give you the slide. What would theater be today? Sorry. What would theater be today? Entertainment. Movies. Video games. Well, that's part. Internet could be, that could be overarching. Because you could get your education, your media, your athletics, and now you can get your movies. I don't have to go eat $10 popcorn and pay an arm and a leg, on a date. I can just PureFlix it or Netflix it and stay in my home, eat my own popcorn. But that's what our country that's the Kool-Aid. Hadn't changed, has it? Somebody, if you want to refute that, you have open. Go ahead and tell me. If I'm missing the boat, just go ahead and tell me. I need to know, because I don't think we're missing the boat here. That's what's going on in our world, and we have bought the Kool-Aid, and we have bought this junk that's been sitting down from Washington, and we have sucked it for many years in this country, and we haven't sucked it for only 10 or 20. We've been sucking it for 100. That's why our country is in such sad shape, is we bought into this paganism a long time ago. Even the churches bought into it in some ways at times. Some thought, it's got to be entertainment. We got to entertain you, Well, whatever you bring them in with, that's what you got to keep them with. And he sold them a bill of goods. And you know what? They bought it. Because this date here, 328 BC, interesting date. Alexander the Great comes into Israel, and they, oh no, he's fixing to slaughter us, or kill us, or take us, half of us, back captive. You know what he does? He comes in and he brings the choice lambs and the choice rams to make sacrifice. But again, he's saying, I'm going to make sacrifices to your God. You need to come over and learn more about my gods. Again, Alexander was brilliant. He's like, let's spread this all across culture so we're one cosmopolitan blend. Isn't that what politically correct and religiously correct world that we live in? It's not anything new. I don't think any of you have been born living around since 334 BC. See, Satan likes repackaging things. And you need to understand that. Now, in 327, he dies at an early age, unfortunately. And then they fight. Literally, his generals fight over who's going to be in charge. And literally, it's broken down if you study between the Ptolemies and then the Seleucids, and they're kind of in control, fighting over a thing, and they do some things to the Jews too. And so that just gives you a little bit, first part. Now let's move into some Jewish developments. What's going on in the Jewish world a little bit, okay? The next key date is right here, 250 BC, the Septuagint. Or you may see this. If you ever see LXX, that's referring to the Septuagint. Okay? Now, what is what's the big deal about the Septuagint? Well, you need to understand the Old Testament scriptures were written in Hebrew. The Jews' language was Hebrews. The Septuagint now is written, okay, it's written in Greek. And through Alexander, now this is the thing we need to learn to understand. Yes, we have culture. We live in a Hellenism. But you used to take what's in the culture and redeem it. Okay? What are you saying? Back then, majority of the scriptures are read in the Septuagint now because, you want to know why? Because of Alexander, the common language for the Greeks was called Koine Greek. Okay? It's Koine. Okay? Not classical Greek, just common man. We just talking. What happened was, because of Alexander conquering the known world and getting people to speak the same language, this is key. The New Testament was written in what? What kind of Greek? So that everybody could hear the word. They literally, I'll just tell you this, they used the word to get to the word to everybody, and then they used the roads. We haven't gotten here yet, but we'll just go ahead and parch over there. The Romans who built all the nice roads, Revelations, those 7 churches, hey, that's how the gospel got to those, because the Romans had built the nice interstates, to put in our vernacular. Okay? And so now everybody can hear the word in their own language. Because at that time, majority of people had bought into Hellenization and were able to hear the word in the Greek. Okay, now, things start getting a little iffy here because they're all fighting over control. And so this next date here is a key date because the priesthood is for purchase. 172 BC, the priesthood for purchase. Now the first guy to purchase the priesthood was Jason. That's his brother and long-lost brother. Now you need to understand, how had the high priest always come about? How? Through birth, right? From Aaron to Eleazar, then Phineas and Ferb, and on down. It went on down that way. Now Aaron was the first one, and he was around 1560 BC. Okay? But with what's going on, and now the Romans, now with the Greeks in charge, and they're wanting some money, the priesthood goes up for purchase. Now the Jews, you say, why? What's the big deal about the priesthood being for purchase? There were 3 festivals that they came to Jerusalem for. Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Now why would someone want to be the priest? The high priest. Well, this is what would happen. You're coming from Nazareth or Bethlehem or wherever, and you're coming with your family, your kids, all those people. And if you were going to come for a sacrifice, you had to bring the animal with you. And let's say you were bringing a lamb, and what would happen? They would bring the lamb, and they bring it up. We'll go with the first guy here, Jason, and he would look at it and say, oh, there's a black speck there. It's not acceptable. You'll have to buy one of our animals. Passover week, animals, $100 a week. This one lamb, $100. We're just putting it in our... All other weeks, it's $10. So what would happen, the people would not bring their animals. They would just come and buy one of theirs so they'd have one that would meet the sacrifice. And so that's how it became a very lucrative position. Now, the person who allowed this to take place is called Antiochus the Fourth. And he actually added this to his name. And he came into being at 175. Now, he called himself Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes. The word Epiphanes means God with us, or I am God. You must worship me. And so now the Romans are taking over. They have taken over with Antiochus, and they're taking over from the Greeks. He ordered God to be called this, Zeus Olympius. And this is what you need to understand. This is what's crucial about this date right here, 167. What's crucial about this date is that he literally came in and he forced the Jews to sacrifice a pig on the altar in the temple and make it to Zeus Olympius. Nothing could be more abhorrent, nothing could be more appalling to a Jew than to sacrifice a pig on the altar of God. Now, Baptists will sacrifice a pig any day of the week. But a Jew, according to the law, oh, no, that was a no. That caused them to blaspheme God. And because of that, he takes over and he literally comes after the Jews, and he does three. Actually, this is what he also does. He decreed a capital punishment. If you worshiped on the Sabbath, if you were circumcised, and if you were found reading the Scriptures or had a portion of the Scriptures on you. I mean, he's coming after them. The Jews are literally going through a tough time here. And literally fixing to experience everything. Now let me give you some, we're going to come back to this here in a minute, but let me give you some other groups of the Jews that come out of this time. You've got the Sadducees. Okay? Now who are these guys? This is who these guys came out. They came out of Jason right here. And they were corrupt priests. Some think they came out of Zadok, the priestly line, and the high priest. They were literally, what had happened is these priests had become corrupt. They had become Hellenized. But what did they do? They literally were guardians of the temple policy and the temple practices. If you don't know it, the Sadducees only held to the first 5 books of the Bible, which is called the Torah. They did not believe in the resurrection of the dead, which is key. If you read over, don't quote me because I don't know the passage. But Jesus is talking to both of them, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And he brings up the resurrection. And what happens? Oh, they get into a heated debate. And basically just Jesus leaves them. Because they didn't believe in that. Second, you've got the Pharisees. You've heard of the Pharisees? Hit the next slide. Okay, sorry. You got the Pharisees. They're known as the holy ones or the separated ones. They're going to join along with the Maccabees, which I'll bring out here in just a minute. The Pharisees interpreted the law strictly. They wanted to be separated from this Hellenistic stuff. They wanted to be separated from this corruptness. Okay? And so that's what happens. And so they develop traditions. They seek to make understanding. They write the Mishnah. They're bringing out all these. They turn the law into 613. Okay? Remember, Jesus boils it down to 2. Love God, love people. I like 2 better than 613. So, but they were very religious. They observed prayer times regularly. They held to the Sabbath, on and on. And they really wanted to emphasize the law and the temple and doing deeds of kindness. And so you have these guys, the Pharisees, they're on the scenes. Jesus deals with them. Very, very religious. Trying to run away from Hellenism. And to run away from Hellenism, they make all these laws. I have the same. Well, we don't have as much as we do today, but you had that in the 60s and 70s and some of the 80s. You had some run to legalism. Well, you can't wear pants. You got hair's too long. You know, all this. And then you had others run way over to the charismatic realm, all into the spirit junk and doing all this. And you had this divide, religious people chasing stuff. Whereas I see God always brings us back to what he told the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. There has to be a balance. We worship him in spirit and truth. And so you have the Pharisees. Now the Sanhedrin was the ruling council for the Jews, which would have been partly Pharisees and Sadducees. Now let's move to the next group, because you may have not heard of them. And then again, you may have. You've got the Essenes. Now this is another group. Because of this taking place, 167, bringing pigs into the temple, they're like, we're leaving. We're boycotting. We're out of here. And they go to the desert. They go out by the Dead Sea by Qumran. And they practice worship. They studied the Scriptures. They wrote down the Scriptures. They made copies of the Scriptures, which we are very grateful for today. You want to know why? Because I think they found them in, don't quote me on this date. In 1947, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which helped us interpret Scriptures greatly. Because before then, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and don't quote me, I have to do some more study on this. The Dead Sea Scrolls would date back to somewhere 300 BC or 300. The Textus Receptus, which the King James was off of, is like 900 years before that. See, when you're interpreting Scripture, you want to get the closest back to the time as possible when it was written. And with the Dead Sea Scrolls, that was huge. Huge for the Christian world. That was lanyap. Didn't cost you anything. And so that was the Essenes. Now you have the Zealots. You got the Zealots. Josephus, if you ever hear the name Josephus, he was a Jewish historian. It's written a lot on Jewish history, which tells us a lot about first century and before what's going on in the Jewish world. Now, he referred to them as the fourth philosophy. I would advocate them as, hey, man, they did not like the Romans. They were all about guns and the Lord. Just put it in our day. They were freedom fighters. They wanted to wage war against the Romans. And they believed God was the only one that had the right to rule over them. Remember? Zealot. Remember that word? New Testament? Sound anywhere familiar? Wasn't one of Jesus' 12 disciples a zealot? Simon Peter was a fisherman. Got a zealot. You got a dude that hates Rome. And you got all these missionaries. You got an RS guy, some fishermen, and God uses them all to change the world. And so, but you got this corrupt priesthood, which leads us over to here. Let's go over here very quickly. You got Annas and then Caiaphas, which would have been 30 A.D. Most think, we just looked at this Wednesday night. We just looked at Monday after Palm Sunday. And what does Jesus do? He comes in to the temple and he says, you turn my place into a den of thieves. And he turns over the money changers and he says, you need to get out. What's key is Annas had been high priest, and most think the mall where they were selling all of this stuff was his. And Caiaphas was related to him, who was high priest, who Jesus came before. What's amazing is Jesus comes before this high priest who didn't even have the right to lay down the sentence because he had paid for it. He was not in the lineage of Aaron. And so it's interesting. If you don't know what this date is here, 4 BC, the birth of Jesus. Now what's interesting is between Aaron and Jason, okay? So you got from 1560 BC to 172 BC. Guess how many high priests there were? That's 1,388 years. You want to know how many high priests there were? Listen to this. 38. Why? Because they basically served most of their life. Now, from 172 to 30, which is 242 years, you know how many priests they had? 43. That's how corrupt they had become. 38 for 1,388 years? You do the math, that's a lot. That's serving a long time. That's not long there. And so what's happened is this has become very corrupt. Now let's go back to 164 BC, because this is a key time. We're over time, but I'll try to wrap up. 164 BC, actually 167, right after 167, Judas Maccabeus. You may have heard, there's the Maccabean revolt, okay? And in 164, what's so key about this day, okay, here, no more temple sacrifice. None. Okay, they've come in with pigs, you worship Zeus, no more worshiping Yahweh, none of that. They take back the temple. And now you're able, they've instituted temple sacrifice, which is huge, very huge. What is huge about it is after they did this, y'all just going to have to hold on. I've got too much here for you tonight. Because you need to understand this. after they take back the temple in the menorah, which I'm not very, you know what a menorah is. It's kind of the candles with 8 little things. I'm not going to draw it for you because I can't draw it. I can do stick figures. But after they take it back, get this, the thing is supposed to burn for 7 days. But they only have enough oil to burn for 1 day. And by the grace of God, it burns all 7 days, and they still celebrate. There you go. Hanukkah. It took place, I believe, on December 6th. I think 164, but don't quote me on that date. But it took place in December. That's why they celebrate it in December. It's because they celebrate Hanukkah. Did Jesus ever celebrate Hanukkah? Yes, he did. It's called the Feast of Dedications in John 10. And so read that. Now let me go to the New Testament very quickly. Gosh, I don't have time to get all this to you. But this has been silent. Now, there's a lot been going on, right? A lot that we're still experiencing today. Okay? But let's go to Luke chapter 1, verses 5 through 20. And let's look at this very quickly. In the days of King Herod, I didn't even have time to get you through there, to get you all the way to Caesar Augustus. But in the days of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest of Abijah's division named Zechariah. His wife was from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both were righteous in God's sight, living without blame. Now, let me just stop right there. When it says living without blame, it does not mean they're perfect. It meant they understood that they had sinned, and because they had sinned against Yahweh, they needed to make sacrifices to God. Because they knew that only through the sacrifices their sins could be forgiven. And so, blame according to all the commands and the requirements of the Lord. Let's move on. But they had no children because Elizabeth could not conceive, and both of them were well along in their years. And God's great about, we're going to see, give children at late in life. He did that with Abraham and Sarah. And when his division was on duty, he was serving as a priest before God. So Zechariah is a priest. It happened that he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and burn incense. At the hour of incense, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. And an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw him, he was startled and overcome with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, because your prayer has been heard." Just stop right there. Go back that last. Just stay right there. Okay? And so, basically what you have here is you've got the temple, and this is the Holy of Holies. This is the holy place. This is the table of showbread. Now what has happened is Zechariah is coming, and he's making incense on these coals here, and it's coming up, the smoke, which represents the prayers of the people. And he looks to the right. Now in the Bible, to the right is always the position of authority. And what's appearing to him? An angel. Now, let me get to what's so amazing about Zechariah here. Zechariah is one of 18,000 priests in Israel during first century here. What they would do is they would come in and they would be divided into subgroups of 700, and they would work 2 weeks and then go back home. And they would draw and divvy up their duties. See what? And many of their duties might be like shoveling salt in the salt chamber, or cutting wicks on the candles. But Zechariah, don't have time, but go read the passage. It says he's an old man here. And today he gets to go to offer incense. He's an old man. It's his day. And he's offering that, and all of a sudden, God shows up in an angel. God's timing. 400 years right here. Hasn't really spoken. Comes right here and speaks to Zechariah, a priest, an old man. And he breaks this silence and this unrest with a prophetic word to an old man. I don't have time to read the rest of the passage to you. You read it. But he's telling, man, you're fixing to conceive. Your wife is fixing to conceive Elizabeth, and she's going to give birth to who? John the Baptist, the forerunner to the Messiah, which is huge. Because what have they been looking for? The Messiah. They're like, Lord, dude, we've been going through this. I didn't even get to this. This is when the Romans come into power. Man, then they put the heat on even more in 63 BC, all the way up to here. They're like, oh, man. They're kind of like when they were in Egypt, in bondage and working, having to get their own straw to make the bricks and everything. What's going on here is Jesus, you need to get this, I'm wrapping up, is Jesus had to come back with a working temple. Here there's not a working temple. There had to be a working temple. You want to know why? Because he was the Passover lamb. What day did he die on? Passover. That's what's so huge. But what's so huge is that had to take place. But again, you've got to understand, all this they've been going through, Antiochus, and then Pompey, and then on and on. You just read history. But then you've got Caesar Augustus, Herod. And they're just under total oppression. And what are they looking for? A Messiah, but the wrong one. That's why it's important you understand, hey, all of this is taking place to fulfill the Messiah to be born. But most of them were looking in the wrong place. They were looking for the government, looking for paganism, and he comes in a manger, the Messiah. That's why it's important to understand what's going on here. Because literally, Jesus flips the world upside down, and they're looking for it in other ways, and they miss him. And many people miss him today because they have bought in to that paganism. And that's why it's important for us to do all that we can to reach people, to redeem the culture, to do everything we can. Yeah, it now ties in with this morning a little bit. Hey, can you use athletics? Yes. If you can, you do everything you can. If you're to reach them with the gospel. If you're good in education, you do whatever you can to point them to the true educator. If you're good in media, man, you can use media. Now, most of the time they're going to trash you, but, Or you can use what's being used today. You and I don't realize really what's being used today more than anything is movies all around the world. But Christian movies. And most of them are not being really watched. They're being watched here, but you know where they're hitting? In other countries. Because in some countries, they're actually watching them in Muslim countries, and they have access to them. And so what are we to do? Understand God has given his word, and we're to take it to the nations. Don't buy into the paganism. Don't buy into the fear of government, but be about what God's called us to do. Let's pray.